Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, where we will learn how to exceed guest expectations in a contactless world. My name is Matthew Stevens. I am the Managing Director at eHotelier, and I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. My guest today is Moritz von Petersdorff-Campen. He is the co-founder and Managing Director at SuitePad, responsible for sales, marketing, HR, and finance. After completing his studies at the WHU Otto Bleisheim School of Management, with time spent working in Japan and Chile, he founded cloudnumbers.com, a cloud computing startup, before founding SuitePad. In his free time, Moritz enjoys traveling with his family. Welcome, Moritz. Thanks for joining me today.
Matthew, thanks a lot for having me. Great to be here.
Moritz, can you please take us through the customer journey and give us an insight into how technology can drive guest engagement in the future?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Very happy to do that, and very happy to give you and the audience a brief overview of what we see happening in the digital hotel space, or in the contactless hotel space, as we call it for today's webinar. I think it's quite striking if we look back what has happened and shifted over the last 2 or 3 years with regards to digitization in our space. I think it becomes very clear to everybody that there are some major forces out there that are leading to a stronger degree of digitization in our industry. And I brought 2 of them to kick off today's session with me, so that you see what we see happening in the market and what we believe which impact it will have on our industry in the long run, to then go into the different ways of engaging with customers during the stay and what the advantages and disadvantages are. But talking about those major trends, I think the first one is really that we see that guests want to go more digital. So what you can see here is an overview of the global food ordering industry. So basically a customer that typically stays in a hotel as well, but in this case, ordering their food at home. And it shows the share of digital business from those ordering. So whenever you order your pizza through an app, you would be here in the blue bar. And if you still do it through the phone, you would be in the gray bar. But I think what we can see here quite nicely is that over the last 10 years, digital ordering has really taken off, and there's a big demand from customers to go digital when it comes to ordering different foods and services. So I think it's very fair to say that guests really want to go digital. That said, if we look at the hospitality industry, I would assume that most hoteliers listening in today still have an in-room dining share booked through the phone of around 80% or higher. Or if you're not offering in-room dining, it might be a service or whatever being delivered to the room, like an additional towel or whatever the guest may need. Most of the requests still come in either through the phone or by approaching the reception directly. But I think it's still very fair to say guests want to go digital, and they want to engage with their hotel in a digital way. So that is one obvious trend that we see also when running around the city and seeing how many people are carrying mobile devices. The second major trend that we're seeing in the industry, and I think we feel this as an industry even more strongly than we do feel the guests need to go digital, is that we're living in a world where staff is rare, especially qualified staff is rare, which leads to hotels needing to operate on a similar level as many did in 2019 with the team that's smaller. And I think in the long run, if you try to do the same amount of business, or in some cases even more business than 3 years ago, with a team that is not as well educated in many cases, or not as big in other cases, that will lead to trouble in the long run, because either the team is gonna burn out, and in those cases they will look for another company to join, or hotels, and we've seen that a lot in the past, in many cases need to reduce the number of rooms they can offer, reduce the number of services they can offer in order to cope with this situation that various hotels are facing. And this problem is not going to go smaller. It's not going to become smaller, because if we look at what's happening from a macroeconomic point of view, with the baby boomer generation slowly but surely retiring, we are finding ourselves in a situation where overall there are not enough qualified people coming in, while lots of qualified people leave in our workforce as a whole. So this trend is only going to become bigger. And obviously, if you don't have enough people on board, or you struggle to find the right people, but you don't want to be in a situation where we're going to do less business because you're reducing your services, I believe the only way to overcome this is by becoming more digital in your operations and in the tools that you provide. And that brings me basically to the conclusion, which I think has become common sense more and more, but I think it's good to see those major drivers behind it, is that guests really want to go digital. And from my point of view, hotels don't have an option. They really need to go digital if they want to be in business in the long run. And the good news is we've done that before, and there's a high chance we're going to do it again, or I think there's no way around doing it again because of those major forces that we see. I think the only question is who is going to do it successfully. But let's take a look, for instance, at how typically those processes where things are being digitized go. We find ourselves usually in an analog world where we don't have any digital tools in place, like we used to book our hotel room through the phone or by just walking into the hotel and booking a room. That changed once the first digital tools were there. So some guests started to book through a hotel website or started to book through an OTA. But by now, we are basically in a world where guest adoption for the booking, for instance, has happened significantly, and we're in a digital first world. So nowadays, most bookings pre-stay are happening in a digital world. So I would say for hotel bookings, we are already in a digital first space. And I think the same is true for post-stay. Because if you ask guests for feedback, typically the way you receive the feedback is either through an OTA or through hotels' feedback tools that they have in place that are typically digital as well. So the paper-based feedback that you hand over at reception is way less common than it used to be 20 years ago. And nowadays, most of the feedback is coming in through digital means, which means also post-stay, we have arrived in a digital first world. I would claim, though, that during stay, we're not there yet. And I think room service orders that are still happening through the phone, requests for towels, requests for other services that are happening at the reception or that are coming in through the phone, or the reason that many hotels, especially in the 4- and 5-star segment, still feel the need of providing a phone in the room is testament to the fact that we are at this point in time only as the digital as an options world when it comes to the during stay phase. And I believe that will change going forward because of the two major forces, which are guests wanting to go more digital and hotels needing to go more digital because of the staff shortage. So I think we'll see a transition from during stay for the during stay piece from digital as an option to digital first. The question is just how can we do it and how can we get this guest adoption that we need for that transition? Generally speaking, I think it's fantastic news for the hotel industry because it means that hotels who are able to manage this transition well, they will strive over the next couple of years, because it essentially means that the guests would like to have a digital solution, which at the same time allows hotels to run their operations with less costs. I don't want to overuse the room service example, but in a digital world, the guest is ordering room service through a digital mean, and that order goes directly to the right person in the kitchen who can start preparing that order instead of having that go through the room service phone. Maybe somebody's not picking up right now, then it's being wired to reception. Reception is putting it maybe in a POS, maybe on a piece of paper, various different ways, but usually there's a lot of overhead around it. The way guests prefer to order hotel services or to engage with hotels is actually also from a financial point of view better for hotels. So in this rare case, it doesn't happen very often, but by giving the customer what they want, hotels actually have a good chance of making more money than before, because by now most guests want to go more digital. So there will be winners in this game. But obviously, where there are winners, there will also be losers. And I think losers will be hotels that are either not going to adopt digital means at all, or that are basically going into the wrong direction. Because in this digital first world, I think the game has changed a little bit, and solutions that were the right decision from a couple of years back might not be the perfect decision at this point in time. But what will it mean to be on the wrong side here? I mean, first of all, it'll mean that guest expectations are not being met, because a guest who wants to go digital and doesn't have a chance to do it is probably not going to be as happy with the hotel as if they would be offering the type of digital services that they want to use. And second point, obviously, if you are not running very efficient operations with the help of digital tools, you will see higher costs in the long run. And not meeting your guest expectations, leading to potentially fewer guests or lower rates in the long run, while increasing costs are happening, is already quite bad. But it can become even worse, because for the pre-stay phase and post-stay phase, we've already seen that OTAs were really able to capture a lot of the guest attention. And nowadays, those OTAs are already trying to compete for the customer's attention during the stay as well.
So Moritz, can you give us some examples? You mentioned the OTAs having that direct relationship with the guest. Can you give us some examples of how they do that and how the hotels can compete with the OTAs to win back that direct relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think take Booking.com as one example. What they did a couple of years back is they purchased OpenTable, which is a platform that many of us know for restaurant bookings. But that basically already shows you that hotels go from OTAs like Booking go from selling rooms in the pre-stay phase to selling tables at the restaurant, which is typically an upsell that you would be doing during the stay. And for that, they're making a commission nowadays. So they're definitely seeing a strategic shift into that direction. Another example would be Expedia. If you check in with Expedia, or if you book a hotel with Expedia through the Expedia app, very often at a time where you would typically have done the check-in, Expedia will ask you for a quick feedback right on the Expedia app. So basically, we're taking the idea of during stay feedback, which in the past was also a domain that was completely owned by the hotels. And that was given into the hand of OTAs. And my last example would probably be TripAdvisor. I mean, TripAdvisor is almost on anybody's phones anyways for tours, activities, things to see when you are traveling. And at the end of the day, the hotel with their information system on their restaurants and services will always compete with platforms like TripAdvisor on the guest's own phone. So that the guests will then be checking out where to go for dinner tonight. And if the digital offering of the hotel is not as good as, for instance, TripAdvisor would be, then there's a high chance they are not dining with the hotel, but with someone else.
The OTAs are faceless entity. You know, it's a purely digital entity. It's faceless. It has no personality. It has no service, and yet it's creating this digital service. Do you think guests staying in a hotel actually want a relationship with the people in the hotel? Do they want personalized service, or is there a case where hotels are turning into a commodity and actually removing the customer service and just providing the product?
I think the answer to your question is it depends. So when and you just mentioned that I like to travel as well. I mean, obviously I do that a lot for business purposes. I do that a lot with my family as well. But for if I look at myself only, the way I travel and what I expect from a hotel can be really different. So if I'm going to, I don't know, later this week, I'll be going to Munich, and my expectations, it's a business trip that I have for the hotel that I'm staying with regards to personal interactions wouldn't be very high. So I'll be arriving there I'll be staying 2 nights. I'll be arriving at 10 p.m. I have meetings starting from 9 a.m. in the morning, going all the way to 6 p.m. Then I'm going to go out and see friends or watch a soccer game. And then the next day I'll be back to work before I board the train in the afternoon again and arrive back home at, I don't know, 9:10 or something like that. So I don't need to see anybody. For me, in this scenario, it needs to be frictionless. It needs to be easy. I don't need to have much human interaction. But if I'm going on holidays on a, I don't know, 2-week trip staying at 2 different hotels or something like that, have my family along, want to see the area, want to see, be at the city or just being at the beach. Those interactions that I have with people are part of what makes my stay great. So I think it really, A, depends on the traveler, B, it depends on the situation. So I think hotels are well advised in thinking their concept through. But I think one mistake that many hotels make in this situation is if they think like, oh yeah, I'm more on the personal interaction side. I think hotels have to be careful that this doesn't become an excuse for not acting on it. Because as a reminder, usually guests want to engage digitally with the hotel. And also me being in a family resort, I have my situations where I don't want to talk to anybody, but if I want to order a special service or at 10 p.m. in the evening would like to know more about what the hotel has to offer in their spa, I would rather want to do this, for instance, on a tablet or through a digital way, because there's nobody going to be at the spa reception at that time of day, and I wouldn't be able to call them because the kids are already asleep. And so we got to be careful that this focus on human interactions doesn't become an excuse for not thinking digitally as well, because at the end of the day, we need to do both if we want to remain control over our customers and don't want to lose them during stay to OTAs as well.
So do you think then it's about providing the customer a choice, providing the digital services, making them available to them, but also educating your team and in providing that personalized service as well?
Exactly. I think, especially if you think about luxury hotels, true luxury is to provide the customer with a range of services, but they will need to pick what they can do, but they could be doing whatever they want to do. And that, I think, is what you need to aim for in terms of service quality. So some customers want to go for personal interactions, others may want to go more digital. Depending on the situation, guests will have different needs, and it's about providing different ranges of solution. But then obviously, and we'll be talking about how we can implement digital solutions in a second and how they are different. But still, obviously, we need to watch how often are those different digital solutions actually being used, because there can be big differences there. So yeah, but if we summarize this, and I truly believe that if we manage this process well as an industry, we have a fantastic chance to work on this and to become more successful as an industry, because we will have a chance to have happier guests who will be spending more money if they have various different channels of how they could be doing that. As a hotel, I can become more efficient, which I need to become anyways, but it's still going to be good for my bottom line. As a hotel, I have the chance to stay in control of guest loyalty in this case, because part of this interaction will shift into the digital world. And as a hotel, I better make sure that it's going to be my digital world if this interaction is shifting into the digital space. And as we talked about a second ago, if I have my guest reaching out to the hotel for standard requests in a digital way, like ordering a towel or whatever it is, then the team will have more time to think more about how to create experiences for the customers instead of just handling a standard request that basically a machine could be handling as well. And that will also bring the value that people in our industry provide to a whole new level, because they can focus on the more engaging, also the more complicated tasks, but really those things that can make a difference during a stay. So if we manage this process well, I think the future for our industry, for during stay guest engagement, can be quite bright. Problem is, though, we're not there yet. So I think during the stay, we're still in this digital as an options world. And I think the reason is that we haven't really seen guest adoption for this picking up dramatically, despite the fact that customers actually want to go digital in other industries, and I believe also in the hotel industry. And I think the reason for that is that for this digital as an options world, we very often have the right solutions. But I think if we want to go digital first, we might have to rethink the solutions that we are bringing into our hotels. Let me tell you what I mean with that. So obviously, there are various different ways of how hotels can engage with guests. And the first one that comes to mind for many would be apps. I think apps, especially for larger hotel chains, are great. If you have your loyalty program baked into that and you can collect your points through it, I think various frequent travelers are using those apps to book their next stay. And they are responsible for a decent number of check-ins in those hotels. But also for the larger hotel corporations, the problem of an app really is that it's only those very frequent loyalty travelers that are using them quite extensively. For mid-sized chains or hotel groups, we see that very often, even for them, an app doesn't make sense because the download rate is so low, typically around 5 to 10%, that it really doesn't make a big difference for them. And for individual hotels, if it's not a super special case, it, from my point of view, rarely makes sense to offer it because those usage rates can be even lower, which is also reflected in a relatively low overall time spent on that solution per stay.
Mm.
What works better, and it's actually a product that we provide as well, is a mobile website. So basically, you can use the start page of the Wi-Fi to engage with the customer. Every guest signs into the Wi-Fi. They'll see this overview. Sure, lots of them will bounce because they wanted to check their emails in the first place, but it's still a good way of engaging with customers. And same is true for QR codes. So if you have a very specific request that you want to handle, then the guest can just scan that in and through their phone order different services. That's already used a little more than apps because there's not the hurdle of downloading anything on your own phone that you later then have to get rid of again. So we see also in our solution that the usage of this mobile website is already a bit stronger. Even stronger than that is something that I wouldn't have expected there. It's the smart TV. I think that is something that we have had in our hotels for ages, and it's surprising that it's still being used. I think the main reason for it is that there's a big screen, it's right in the room, and you can just use it to zip through the different services a hotel provides. The big disadvantage is obviously, I mean, it's a coincidence, but we have a TV in this small meeting box, and I have a remote control right next to me. So I didn't plan this for this to happen. But if you try to order room service through this, I think it becomes clear that this is not the way we will be bringing digital guest engagement into the hotel room. Mm. And what we see at SuitePad is that if you put an in-room hardware into the room, you take the advantages of those different solutions. So basically the fact that there is a tablet PC standing right in the room, like the TV, is driving engagement. Plus, it's as easy to use as a mobile website or an app would be. It's basically bringing those two benefits together. Plus, we are now replacing through our solution also the phone and the remote control. And through that, you are then obviously providing other reasons why the guest is interacting with that device. So the guest might only want to turn on the TV, but then they see a promotion or they see a push notification. And those push notifications in particular are extremely powerful on this solution, because if you only have 10% of guests downloading apps, and then of 10%, only 10% accepting push notifications, you will reach only of 100 guests, end up reaching one guest. While for an in-room tablet, you typically see that 60 to 70% of customers pick it up. And then of those 60 to 70%, you reach all of them. So you have a factor of 60 to 70 if you want to upsell your services more. And those are the reasons why there's way stronger guest adoption behind an in-room tablet. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to talk down any of those other solutions. We have solutions for the TV as well. We have a mobile website. We don't have an app, but there are lots of hotels where an app can make a ton of sense. But if you want to really bridge this gap from the digital as an options world to the digital first world, you will need solutions that are being used by 60, 70, 80% of your customers. You will need solutions where you can send push notifications to all of your customers in order to be able to really upsell your services. And I think you also need solutions that unify various different tools that typically sit in the room, like the guest directory, like the remote, like the phone, on a single device, to give the guest all the more reasons to engage with it, which is then driving up usage, which is then going to drive revenue. And those are really the things that will help you to bridge this gap from digital as an option to digital first.
Mm. So the elephant in the room, Moritz, what are the realistic figures around the number of devices that actually go missing? You're putting a really valuable device in a room. I think every hotelier
Yeah.
wants to know, do they get stolen? Do they go missing?
I mean, I would be lying if I'd say they never get stolen. I mean, they do. There's a lot of things that we do around it, them not getting stolen. So, for instance,
Yeah.
you couldn't be using this device anywhere else. It's purpose made for the hotel industry, and it's basically it doesn't have a camera. It has a remote control in there, and it only runs the hotel services, which is then leading to a theft rate which is typically below 2% per year. Or theft and breakage also. So both of them combined is usually below 2%. We actually now went that far that we insure all of our devices in the first couple of years against theft. Because I understand the concern from many hoteliers. Lots of things are being stolen in hotels, but we put a lot of work behind that not happening to our devices. That seems to be working quite well. So nowadays we cover the risk so that the hotels don't have to.
Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, there's a lot of technical things you can do to lock them down. I guess it's a bit like a room key. They find out when they leave the hotel that the tablet's useless and then send it back. So
we've
hopefully
had
that's
that before. Yeah, we've had that before, that devices were being sent back also because kids were taking care of them. Sometimes to the hotel, sometimes they send it to our office and we then forward it to the hotel. But it's fortunately not a very big problem these days.
Good. So if a hotel was to go fully digital, how do you balance this with that personalized service? We talked about, it not being one or the other, but how does a hotel balance that personal service and take that personal service into that digital experience as well?
Yeah. So I think obviously you need to think about your concept and what you as a hotel want to stand for and what kind of experience you want to provide. So I think that is the first step. And once you have that clear, I think it makes sense to think about what can technology do better than humans can. They're not a crazy amount of things, but I think there are certain things that technology can do better. For instance, one of the features that is extremely popular these days is we call it the green option. So basically, this is where guests are being asked if they would like to waive their daily housekeeping and only have their room cleaned every other days. Depending on the region where you're at, the cost savings from this can easily be around $10 to $15. And if you have a hotel with 200 rooms, we have examples that they are saving more than $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on a monthly basis through this one feature alone. That being said, this is something that is extremely hard to communicate for humans, because you don't want to be at reception and ask the customer, hey, by the way, how do you feel about not having your room cleaned tomorrow? Even if the hotel guest would be fine with it, it's hard to communicate, and it's going to make the receptionist very unpleasant to ask that question. This is the type of question that is much better being asked through a digital solution that sits in the room. Another example would even be room service. I mean, I understand that many room service operators are very good at upselling, which is also something technology can do, but generally they are quite good at it. That being said, being able to see great pictures, maybe even a video of the chef talking about what they would suggest for the customer to eat, or talking about certain specialities, be it in the restaurant or on the room service menu, are things that that humans on the phone cannot do, no matter how well they are at describing and praising the food that the hotel has to offer. So I think if you give that a long and tough thought, then you will come up with things that are better suited for a digital solution over what humans can actually do when interacting with customers. And then obviously you'll need a solution that the guests are using and are engaging with. But if you have that, I think you can combine the best of both worlds quite nicely.
Actually, interesting. I had a recent trip to Singapore, and I called down reception because I needed some documents printed, and there was absolutely no chance. We don't have a business center. I
Oh,
looked on the app in the guest room, and it said, "Yes, we provide business center services. Just come down to reception and talk to the receptionist." So it was where the technology actually provided a better solution than the human. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, I understand how that goes these days with people in many cases just being trained for a couple of weeks. And
yeah,
then the first thing they learn is how to operate their PMS. And the business center is then probably item, I don't know, 150 on the onboarding list.
for sure.
But yeah, you're right. I think the advantages of technology is, if sometimes I like to say a SuitePad in your room is a little bit like an additional employee. It's there 24/7. It speaks various different languages. It has a consistent quality in terms of communication, and but it has its limits, and that's, I think, also that is very good. It's obviously the case that sometimes guests will write about our solution on TripAdvisor or so and say how great it was to have that in the room. But what you'll find more often is the great spa therapist that did a fantastic job, or that there was a fantastic guest relation manager or a fantastic receptionist that
Mm,
really helped to make this stay memorable.
mm.
And we can help to an extent, but nobody is going to go home and say, well, the hotel was crappy, but this in-room tablet was so fantastic. I think the guest expectations are now that things like that, digital guest engagement solutions, should be there.
Yeah.
And it's not about surprising them with that anymore. It's more about that guests really demand those digital ways to engage
Mm.
with hotels.
In my case, it was a fantastic solution because it was a digital response. It gave me the facts that were obviously
Ah,
dictated by the hotel in the services
yeah.
that the hotel wanted to provide, but then it was
Mhm.
actually fulfilled by an individual, with the most amazing personal service. Nothing was too much trouble. They did it immediately, and it was that type of personal service that you expect. So I think that was a
Yeah.
real, a real meeting of digital technology providing the information, but a human actually delivering the service.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think that's a great example of how those two worlds can tie in nicely into each other.
Mm. Enjoy hearing your thoughts and your insights into guest technology, Moritz. It's been fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks a lot, and have a great day, everybody.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us today. For more information on SuitePad, you can visit the website at suitepad.de or contact Moritz at moritz.petersdorff@suitepad.de. Thank you again. Take care and safe travels.